I'd like to just ask you a question. I know that, like me, you have a parent who was born in Japan. You speak better Japanese than I do. I know, like me, you have family in Japan. I ask you to consider this. Imagine we're not in 2025, but rather in 1942. And in 1942, you and I, along with our parents and our siblings, our communities, have been ripped away from really the only homes that we've known, whether in Seattle or anywhere else along the West Coast. And we've been moved as children, like my mother, to places in the interior of the United States, where you live in army barracks that have been hastily constructed. A little upgrade from the horse stalls that might have been constructed in Puyallup, as referenced by the previous speaker. And then your elder siblings, your parents, your grandparents, are given a questionnaire developed by the United States military in 1943 to help identify the tendencies of loyalty and disloyalty in the United States among the Japanese who were imprisoned. Mr. Speaker, these questions really hinged on the loyalty part hinged on two primary questions, and I'd like to share them with you. Question 27, if you don't mind my reading, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Are you willing to serve in the armed forces of the United States on combat duty where ordered? This was given to women and to children and to those who were born in another country, Japan. Question 28. Will you swear unqualified allegiance to the United States of America and faithfully defend the United States from any or all attack by foreign or domestic forces, and forswear any form of allegiance or obedience to the Japanese emperor or any other foreign government, power, or organization? Mr. Speaker, how would you answer those questions? Your family is behind barbed wire. They are under military guard. Some of your family members who had been volunteers in the military were reclassified as 4C and booted out. How would you answer those questions? I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that confusion and consternation prevailed in the Japanese communities in the concentration camps. This was administered, as I said, in the War Relocation Authority centers and in federal detention centers across the United States. It was administered to the Issei, those who immigrated from Japan, who were by law prohibited from becoming United States citizens, leaving them to wonder if they would be countryless if they answered yes. Some American-born Nisei, angered by the failed protections of their constitutional birthrights, responded, no, no, leading to their subsequent relocation and detention at the Tule Lake Center, identified as disloyal. Mr. Speaker, many of those who were identified as disloyal were then deported to Japan under an inaccurately titled repatriation program. They were not Japanese citizens. They were American citizens by birth. Of course, as you heard from the previous speaker, there are many who responded, yes, yes, the majority. And they formed the celebrated, segregated, all-volunteer Nisei, which is the American-born Japanese, 442nd Regimental Combat Unit and Military Intelligence Service, who cumulatively acquired, through their heroic exploits, they earned the designation of being the most highly decorated unit for its size and length of service in the entirety of U.S. military history. In my book, that certainly is a demonstration of loyalty. But loyalty, Mr. Speaker, is not just a feature of battlefields and of wars. It is something that every person can demonstrate and exercise in our day-to-day interactions. I'd like to give you a few examples, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about my aunties. These are my aunties through years of love, but not by blood, who come from a family of nursery operators north of San Francisco. In their area, 100 Japanese families lived, and only 10 returned. My aunties, the Niedemiyas, were able to return because their neighbor willingly took on the task, really the job, the work, the burden of caring for their nursery, of paying for their taxes, of ensuring their homes and properties were not vandalized, but not just of the Niedemiyas, but also of 2 other Japanese families. That gentleman, Mr. Francis Abe, recalled that the reason he wanted to do this was because during World War I, he realized as a student that his mother was speaking to him in Swiss German. And if you know your history, you know in World War I, we were at war with Germany. And he understood how speaking your native tongue could make you a target. And so he wanted to do what he could to protect his neighbors, the kids that he grew up with, the kids his kids grew up with. I can tell you about stories in Seattle as well. There's an institution in my district, in the International District, called Higo's 5 and 10 Variety Store. When the Murakamis left, they boarded up the store, they put away all of the goods, and they entrusted the care of their building to one of their tenants, a man by the name of Carl Zimmerman, who was a loan and bondsman with his little office in their building. And he took such great care of it that when they returned, they only had to unboard the building and take out all of the products from the boxes that they had stored. I could tell you about Marco Calvo, who was a fishmonger who helped rent out the homes of the Japanese families who were also fishmongers and paid their mortgages so that when they returned, they would have a home to come to. Mr. Speaker, I would tell you about Edward Bensusan, who was an attorney who helped returning Japanese Americans resettle, filed discrimination lawsuits, such as the one against the Lions Club when they rejected a Japanese American member, and helped them form the First Hill Lions Club, which continues to operate today. I would incidentally note that the Nisei Veterans Committee was born out of the same sense of discrimination when the veterans of foreign wars would not admit war returning heroes to join the VFW. These men, Zimmerman, Calvo, Bensusan, the reason they did this was because they lived with Japanese American families, and as Jews, they understood through their own historical experiences what it means to be the victim of racial discrimination and targeting and violence. And they parlayed that into a massive demonstration of how to be a loyal friend. Mr. Speaker, in signing H.R. 442, President Ronald Reagan recalled a statement he made in 1941. And if I may read from his statement.
Please proceed.
He was recalling an incident where a family, a Gold Star family, was receiving a flag. And he, as an actor and the head of the Actors Guild at that time, had been invited to speak. And he said, "Blood that has soaked into the sands of a beach is all of one color. America stands unique in the world, the only country not founded on race, but on a way, an ideal. Not in spite of, but because of our polyglot background, we have all had all of the strength in the world. This is the American way." So, Mr. Speaker, on this day of remembrance, I ask that you encourage Washingtonians from every corner to contemplate this notion of what it means to be loyal, and in particularly in the context of the preamble to our United States Constitution, of being loyal to the notion of creating a more perfect union. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.